listen. There's always been this big hype around Mary Poppins, who still has that perfect score on Rotten Tomatoes, for those who care about that. But this was the only Disney film nominated for Best Picture while Walt was still alive. It has the record for the most Disney wins. But as beloved as this story of a nanny is, this wholesome tale, are y'all really gonna tell me that she's not pushing? Let me explain. Now, the most interesting part to me about the original Mary Poppins is the backstory to it. Originally it was a book by P.O. Travers, who was a very strict lady and had very strict rules about the adaptation of her book. I mean, we're talking about a single lady who adopted when she was 40, but when she saw that the baby was a twin, she declined the BOGO and just took the one. And the rest of that story is the complete opposite of magical if you read up on it. So it was obvious that P.O. Travers wasn't gonna like the adaptation, They even made a whole movie about how she really didn't like the adaptation, which ironically stars Emma Thompson, who played a very similar nanny in another movie. And while it's funny that the movie covering a problem that someone had with Disney is made by Disney, I thought it was interesting to see the perspective of why Travers held the book so close to her, because to her, it was the story of her father struggling to raise them. How if he just had a little help by someone coming out of the blue, maybe things would have turned out differently. But Disney put in dancing penguins instead. So the first person we see in this movie is this dude named Bert, who has like 25 different jobs. He's not only breaking the fourth wall and talking to the audience, but considering he's the one guy who knows Mary Poppins, I'm a little iffy if she's even real, because this guy's not completely there. We then meet the Banks family, who's literally falling apart because their neighbor is always blowing a cannon. But we see that their kids are so bad, nannies are just quitting left and right. And I'm blaming this all on the parents. Mrs. Banks is pushing forward the suffragette movement, and she's all about that, but she can't push her kids to be well-mannered. Mr. Banks is always all on about being on schedule, but does an entire musical before he realizes his kids are missing. So when they decide to put on an ad for a new nanny, be it the magic of Walt himself, Mary Poppins flies in and literally blows away the competition to get the spot. And here's how I know that Mary's popping other things on the side. You know how Lakeith in Atlanta always looks down on people every time he says, crazy mentions like an invisible car and stuff like that? Well, this lady does the same thing, right? Like this lady sliding up banisters and flying in, but then gives the dad a crazy look when the paper he burnt shows up again. And for anyone who doubts that she's pushing, look at this never-ending Halloween Town bag. You don't think she's got contraband in there? She sings a whole song about consuming narcotics.
For a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down.
It's very clear that she's got a bigger ego than Kanye.
As I expected, Mary Poppins practically perfect in every way.
And not long after the drugs hit, they conveniently jump into the world of Chalk Zone with Bert, and they pull the original Roger Rabbit as they sing with the animations, and things get really trippy. Now, I personally still think these effects are pretty cool, especially if you're on what Mary's selling, but I do think that they earned their special effects Oscar back in the day, and I just love the diversity of it, of my people and humans working together. They then sing the original mumble rap.
It's supercalifragilisticexpialidocious.
Mary then gives them more narcotics as she takes one herself and she's addicted. They hang out in the streets, hotbox a chimney so much that they float, and then meet up with Uncle Albert, who's literally so high he can't stop laughing.
You promised.
Oh, I know, but I tried, really I did, my dear.
Now this man reminded me so much of the Mad Hatter, and to my surprise when I looked it up, he actually is the Mad Hatter. But even madder than that is the whole finale of the movie, where it turns out that the dad may actually be in some financial situations, and he decides to ironically teach his kids to invest. And when he takes them to the bank, Van Dyke yet again is playing another character with this bad grandpa makeup on.
When fall the banks of England, England falls.
And with all this stress and the buffoonery going on, my man just loses it on Mary Poppins.
What is the meaning of this outrage?
I beg your pardon.
Will you be good enough to explain all this?
First of all, I would like to make one thing quite clear.
Yes?
I never explain anything.
At this point, it's clear that he just loses it and decides to get on whatever Mary's selling, because he decides to give everything up and not pay up because he's going to choose his family instead.
Confound it, Banks, I said, do you have anything to say?
Just one word, sir.
Yes?
Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious.
Bruh, you're broke. Lucky for him, this is really dumb. Lucky for him, that final Mary Poppins joke that he said at the bank before he left was so funny that the head honcho of the bank literally laughed himself to death.
Father died laughing. Oh, no, nonsense. Nothing to be sorry about. Never seen him happier in his life. He left an opening for a new partner. Congratulations.
How? They all get high as a kite and live happily ever after as Mary Poppins vanishes with the wind, innocent as can be.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, Mary Poppins. You don't fool me a bit.
Mary Poppins.
So with the new one, Mary takes a page out of Batman's book and decides to return one generation after the first, making this a sequel and not a reboot like a lot of people are thinking that it actually is. Pretty much the kids from the first are now grown up, and if you remember how that boy didn't want to invest in the first movie,
Give it back! Give me back the money!
well, yeah, now his house is getting repossessed. His wife and parents have passed, so it's just him and his sister and his 2 kids struggling to keep things in order. Guy next door is still blasting his cannon, but it's 5 minutes late. Their maid is so bad, Muriel from Zack and Cody probably does more work. And Colin Firth, for whatever reason, is the evil banker who wants to ruin their entire lives. So obviously Mary was gonna pop in again.
Mary Poppins.
She still got her bag of contraband, and just like the first, ain't narking on anyone. So even though these kids are getting high and seeing all these crazy stuff happening, Mary Poppins is like, nah, I don't see nothing. Just like your neighborhood drug dealer, the only ones who can actually smell her coming are the people on the streets.
Nice to see you, Jack.
Good to see you too, Mary Poppins.
Now, on a serious note, I love Lin-Manuel Miranda. I love how he's doing these big movie musicals now, and I can't wait for him to get his EGOT, but boy, does he sound like he has marbles in his mouth.
That's how I live and breathe.
He pretty much has Van Dyke's role in this movie and also serves as the not at all creepy admirer to the sister. I personally love how he has this bit where he gets to rap, but in order to not call it rap in the movie because it's the 1930s, they tell him to do that really long song, just sing it fast. And bro, this man turned London into In the Heights in a second. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say that this sequel is just another trip down the same block, and I agree, it's Mary, so it's a trip, but I guess that's kind of the point. Obviously, every set piece mirrors the first one. It's a very similar story arc with the kids trying to help their father, and then a joke saves the day by the end. They still don't answer anything about how Mary Poppins works, so she doesn't go to jail, but I guess that's kind of the point. An old story for a new generation. So Mary Picklockets then decides to break into this house hidden in an alley, and you already know where she learned that from, and it ends up being her cousin Meryl Streep. Now, to me, this scene serves 2 purposes. 1, to mirror the first Uncle Albert scene, and 2, so Meryl can get another nomination just for cosplaying as Queenie from Fantastic Beasts. Other than that, they should have flipped the scene upside right and cut it out. Now here comes the funniest part of the movie. Throughout the entire thing, they're looking for this banknote that'll save them from their debt, and then it turns out that at the end, the note they needed was glued to the kite the entire time. But even worse than that was that it wasn't even the kids who drew on that piece of paper. It was the father. Lucky for them, Dick Van Dyke is still playing different roles in this one, and he comes in to rescue them from his bitter banker of a son and sets them free. The family then lives happily ever after as we get more drug symbolism from them getting high off balloons, and then we get the weirdest cameo of them all with Angela Lansbury. Now, I love Angela. She's a legend and Mrs. Potts, which is probably why she's in this movie, but it's hilarious how Julie Andrews, who actually played Poppins, did a cameo as a sea monster for Aquaman instead of doing one for this movie. Now, I don't know the whole backstory to why she wasn't in this one, right? But the fact that Lansbury wasn't in the original, but instead a movie called Bedknobs and Broomsticks that is considered one of the biggest Mary Poppins ripoffs, had me questioning if I missed something. Like, can you imagine if they did a Finding Dory sequel, like, I don't know, 30 years from now, and they can't get Ellen DeGeneres back, so they just cast someone from Shark Tale? By the end of it, the family gets money until, they eventually go broke again by the third. Lin goes to the sisters' protest because he's not throwing away his shot, and Mary Poppins once again escapes imprisonment as she gets high for a new generation. But if I'm being honest, that Bedknobs movie is actually better than both of these. Thank you guys for checking out this video. I'm curious to know your thoughts down below in the comments section. Y'all can say that my theory is crazy, but I mean, they're dealing with bricks. There's a lot of blowing. Y'all know what 6 balloon stands for. They're always getting in debt every other generation. I'm just saying there's a bunch of things that are hidden into this movie. And y'all know that Walt Disney back in the day was putting a lot of symbolism. But I'm curious, are you a fan of the original? I've never had this attachment to the first one. I obviously feel that the second one just Force Awakens it, but both fun for what they are. I think they're cool. My favorite song out of this, I'd say, if you guys were naming yours, from the new one, it would be Trip a Little Light Fantastic, and that's only because it reminds me of Ski Mask's Baby Wipe.
I feel fantastic. Trip a little light fantastic.
But that's just me. I'm curious to know your guys' thoughts if the movie worked for you. I've been watching a lot of Broadway, a lot of 2019 videos coming soon. But as I always say, sometimes the medium actually can boost the story. Some stories are better in a particular way. Yo, when this movie makes it to Broadway, that's where I think this Mary Poppins Returns is going to shine the most. But I'm curious to know your guys' thoughts down below in the comments section. Let me know anything else that you want me to wrap up towards the end of the year. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe, and Mary will send you a brick.